everybody. Welcome to the Women in Technology panel at TechEd 2011. Give yourselves a hand for making it. We're so glad to see all of you here. Look at this turnout. Hopefully you've had a chance to start to talk to the women and men at your tables, because this is an excellent opportunity to network, which coincidentally is the subject of our panel today. We wanted to bring everybody together this year to talk about the subject of networking. It's important for everyone, men and women, but often we find that it's not necessarily as natural for us, or it's not necessarily as comfortable or as well socialized. So that's what we'd like to talk about with you today, and our panelists are very eager to share their networking tips with you and to have a discussion. So let me take a brief moment to introduce you to the four of us, and then we will get started. As for me, I'm going to be your moderator today. My name is Cheryl Platts, and I'm a user experience designer over at Microsoft. Very surprising, I know. And I work on System Center Configuration Manager right now, although that will be changing shortly. And before I worked at Microsoft, I was a video game producer for several years, and I'm also on the executive board of a nonprofit organization called Ignite, devoted to helping encourage girls to consider careers in technology and science. We also have Mary Jo Foley from ZDNet. She's been a journalist for over 25 years. I'm sure many of you subscribe to her blog or have watched her Twitter feed, which has over 18,000 subscribers, I believe. And she's also the author of Microsoft 2.0, How Microsoft Plans to Stay Relevant in the Post-Gates Era. Betsy Spear is a 15-year veteran of Microsoft. She's also in the Server and Tools division, and she's a principal program manager in the Windows Server division. She was recognized in Mary Jo's blog as one of the top 10 women to follow at Microsoft, and she's also chairperson of the Women's Leadership Council, which is a networking organization in the Server and Tools division. Amy Barzukas, Amy Barzukas is currently the general manager of communications for Microsoft Server and Tools division. In her 14 years with us, she has served as the general manager for Internet Explorer and has worked in a variety of marketing and communication roles. And feel free to correct me if I did not pronounce that correctly. I think the mics are on.
It's Barzukas.
Barzukas.
It's a tricky one because you have to hit every single letter.
Barzukas. Well, I apologize.
Me too.
Spear. So now you've met all of us. We're going to begin by giving each of our panelists a chance to share their top networking tips with you, and then we'll move into a little general discussion and open Q&A with all of you guys. So if you think of a question, feel free to jot it down or try to remember it, because there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And also take note of the Twitter profile handles on these slides. If you'd like to continue the discussion after the talk, feel free to call us up on Twitter. So without further ado, Mary Jo, would you like to take it?
Sure. Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about 3 networking tips that I've found really valuable in my career as a journalist covering technology. First off, I'd like to talk about mentoring. And for me, mentoring is a little different than it might be for someone who's at a bigger company. I work in a company of one. I work for myself. I'm a freelancer. So for me, I don't have a built-in support system inside my company. There aren't other people I can commiserate with. So I've gone out and I've built a network of peers, people who cover technology, especially who are bloggers, and we've built our own kind of mini Microsoft monitoring community out there. And some of these people are here at the lunch today, which is nice to see them. What we do is we kind of share tips and tricks back and forth among ourselves. And since I'm a journalist, I am not a programmer. I've never studied computer science, but I've learned to cover it over the years by interviewing people. I have a lot of questions when I write articles, and I, without fail, can rely on the people out there who I've built this network with to help me understand something. I've also kind of coached and taught some of the younger up-and-coming bloggers how to cover Microsoft, how to do their jobs as far as taking the technology that they understand and translating it into blog posts and articles. And it's been very interesting, kind of like a back and forth. They've taught me a lot of things about technology. I've taught them how not to get sued by writing a blog post. So it's been a pretty nice, even trade, and that's worked out really well for us. And we have our nice core support group there. Another tip that I have is around social media. And this one may seem very obvious. You know, get out there, get on Twitter, get on Facebook, have a LinkedIn profile. But I see a lot of my colleagues go out there and set up a Twitter account and then never tweet. or tweet once every week or month or year. And it's really amazing when you get out there and start building something like Twitter and you see people actually care what you have to say. And it's a great way to develop new readers for me and new sources, other people who you can get tips from. I was not a believer at all in Twitter, and my boss finally convinced me to try it a year ago. And in 1 year, I've built a subscriber base on Twitter of 18,000 people. I don't even know even a tiny percentage of them, but they follow me, they send in their feedback, they tweet to me, and they're always very surprised when I tweet back, because I try to respond to everyone who tweets to me on Twitter. I remember one guy tweeted to me and he asked a question and he didn't think I was going to answer. And when I did, he tweeted back, "I feel like I'm at a Justin Bieber concert. I'm giggling like a little girl. Mary Jo answered me on Twitter." So just think what you can do. You know, you can build your own network, have all these people giggling like little girls at a Justin Bieber concert. The third tip that I have is more about the kind of the altruistic side of building a network. And a couple of years ago, I was invited by Eileen Brown, who used to work at Microsoft and did a lot of the Women in Technology events, to come and speak on this panel, the Women in Technology lunch at TechEd. I fought her tooth and nail. I did not want to do it because I hated to speak in public. In fact, I almost didn't write my book because they told me I was going to have to do a book tour. And I was so afraid to speak in front of an audience. And Eileen convinced me to try it. And once I did, I realized, wow, people actually can learn something from me, even though I'm not a programmer and I'm not a real woman in technology, even though I am, but didn't really feel like one at the time. So now what I try to do is go out there and tell other people who tell me how afraid they are to just try something that they think is beyond their scope. You know, you may not have the opportunity to speak on a panel, but do something that's kind of outside of your comfort zone. And I feel like by encouraging people to do that and getting more voices heard, that I'm kind of giving back to the community the way someone gave it to me, and help teach me that I had something to say.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mary Jo, and now we're going to move down to Betsy.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me here today. How many of you have been in a room with this many women in technology before? Yes, I was. Well, I think we actually have more here. We only had seating for 400 last year. I think today we have seating for 520. So thank you. I am so excited. So I think a couple of things that I like to think about in terms of building my network, and I love what Mary Jo is talking about being so authentic and putting yourself out there. The first thing I always think about is, what do I need? What am I looking for, and what's the thing I need? And we've spent some time, if you were here last year, we've built this community of women within our Microsoft group that has about 300 women participating pretty regularly, and then another 1,200 in our extended group. And what we started there with was 10 women. And we started by asking ourselves the question, what is it that I need to feel excited about coming to work, about having the connections and the networking that I need to be successful? And what I found was it was usually pretty simple. I just wanted to have lunch once in a while. I wanted to connect on a pretty informal basis. I was just interested in having more of a personal connection with people at work. And when there's not a lot of women, then you're sort of isolated. So that's something that you have to do proactively. And if you're at a smaller company, which last year we heard a lot about, it's even more important to use some of the techniques that Mary Jo's talking about to find those women in your community, and whether they're local or a virtual community that you can connect with. And you know, for me as a woman, I don't really look at my work and life separately, right? Like, I have a life and I work, and I have to sometimes check out for a minute, take care of my daughter, come back in and work, and I mean, it's life, right? So those are all things that I need to talk about. So first point is, what do I need? And then what I found was that other women needed that as well. And it's just become this very natural way of connecting. So stepping outside your comfort zone to ask to have lunch might be the first kind of step in making those connections. What else do I have up there? I know I missed one thing. Go back one. Let's see. Lunch. Oh, the other thing I found is that when I did that on a really regular basis is that I ran into people that I just really clicked with, right? Like I knew right off the bat that we're going to be friends and we have a connection, and so you develop these things and go back to those people because those are the people that you're going to learn from, you're going to be open to and willing to be vulnerable with and talk about what you're afraid of. And gosh, did I get the right review? Did I screw up? What was your first impression of me? Did I come across as being overbearing and whatever, you know, like throw it out there, like just loosen up. Okay, that was it. And then the next one is, who's your sponsor? This is an interesting question. We were talking about this this morning. At a large company like Microsoft, and I would submit I worked at several small businesses before I came to Microsoft, that you need to have someone who's saying, what about Betsy? Right? That things are going on, and there's a reorg, there's a change, there's new roles, there's new bosses. Who's saying, what about Betsy? You know, who's saying, what about you? And you have to ask for that. That's not something that people just are naturally going to do. Now, I have been incredibly lucky. I have a wonderful friend, Ian McDonald, who adopted me as a sponsor when I came to Microsoft. And we just connected, right? And that's how it worked. But that's unusual. That hasn't happened a lot since. I've had to go find those people and say, I need you to sponsor me. And this is what sponsorship means to me. I want you to tell me when you see me doing something stupid. I want you to tell me if I am missing something. I want your feedback, and when I'm not in the room, I want you to look out for me. And so those are the kinds of things. And they need to be in a position of influence somehow. It's a little bit of power, a little bit of control somehow that they have that they can help you with. So I think that would be my second tip. I'm really excited to hear your questions too when we get done. Yeah.
Great. Last but certainly not least, Amy.
So I always have a conflicted relationship with anything that starts with women in. I went to a women's college. I don't really miss it at all. College were not the best years of my life. But when I think about a lot of this stuff, I think too much of the training that we get as women in technology is really how to be more like a man, which I kind of is this, right? And that's not really helpful. And so when I look at networking in general, networking tips are pretty universal, right? You need to get out there. You need to conquer your fear. You need to force yourself to go. And those apply whether you're male or female, happy or unhappy, tall or short, right? It just is. You need to get out there. You need to ask questions. You need to connect with people. And we were talking a little bit earlier this morning, and that was, you may not feel like getting out there and connecting, but if anyone had a mother or a grandmother like mine, you got I know you don't feel happy, but if you smile, you will. And if you don't feel like networking, when you go, you will find that there are other people with whom you make a connection. So smile and try that. Building a network is about building your brand. I think about, when we go into annual review and we talk about people, one of my catchphrases is this a person that to know them is to love them? Or is this a person to meet them is to love them? If you are not a person that to meet you is to love you, you might want to think about those first impressions, because how you come across that first time you meet people, a lot of times you don't get a choice or a chance to do that again. Now, there's plenty of people who to know them is to love them, and that's not necessarily a bad rep. But as you're networking, you're thinking about building that. Think about how you interact with people, and Betsy, you did fine. But you kind of want to make sure that you are thinking about, are you easy to work with? Do you keep your promises? Do you tell somebody you meet at a networking event, let's get together for lunch in the next 2 weeks, and then you never see them again? Not good. So you want to follow up, keep your promises, and think about how you represent who you are in those kinds of opportunities. And then the last is be hungry for information. I, like Mary Jo, did not come from a technical background. And when I first started at Microsoft, I just asked questions. And it wasn't all that long before I found myself having points of view on technical issues and saying things like came out of my mouth in meetings, and I would have no idea how I knew what I was saying, let alone that I was actually entitled to have an opinion on it. But as it turns out, you can ask questions and people want to tell you about themselves. Now, one of the keys to that when you're networking and you're building those relationships is you have to be willing to not be the smartest person in the room. Sometimes the best way to network is to acknowledge that this person knows more than you, and to flatter them and say, you know so much about the TCP/IP stack as I did in 1999, and I am so ignorant. Can you please help me? Turns out, yes, got a lot of answers, and another person now who's still on my call if I have a question list. So really think about making sure that you have the curiosity and that you don't try to figure it out later, but go ahead and ask when you have the opportunity.
So great. And I mean, like, I have a technical background. I have a degree in computer science, and there's just rarely a case when you're in a room full of people where anybody knows everything deeply and broadly, right?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people that have broad, and there's a bunch of people that have specifics, and asking those questions, like, I literally have a technology degree, and a lot of times I feel, oh God, what the hell are they talking about? I have no idea, and I feel like I should.
Yeah.
So the asking a question is great.
And you never know what you might read. I read Cryptonomicon on a plane on a way to a meeting when I was working on some DRM technology back in the day, and so we were meeting with a unnamed governmental agency, and as we're in the car on our way to meet with the unnamed governmental agency, one of the guys in Virginia, one of the guys in the car with us made some comment, and I can't remember what it was. All I remember was I said, "Oh, isn't that like Van Eck freaking?" And he looks at me, he's like, "You're the PR person in the car. Why do you even know the words Van Eck freaking, let alone to correlate that with this?" It's like, I read a novel, got it all together.
That's awesome.
But I think it's also a really important point, the sort of example you give of the Cryptonomicon, being yourself and being a unique and authentic person is so important. I think a lot of folks, especially early in their careers, are intimidated and worried about making a bad impression. Good impressions are especially important, but it's also important to be memorable and let people know what makes you.
And be you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, ladies, for your tips, and for everybody out there. These slides will be on the Tech Ed website, so if you'd like to use these slides as reference, please feel free. And give us feedback on Twitter. We'd love to hear your opinions on these things. And now we're going to move into a couple of starter questions before opening it up to Q&A. And the first question I had for you guys is something we discussed this morning. We were talking about, I think Amy started observing how difficult it can be to make the transition from being the only woman in an office or a group to one of a few women in office or group. And we were talking about some statistics about how there's actually documented bullying between women in workplaces sometimes. And
How many people in the room have ever found themselves to be the only woman in a meeting? Yeah, and so we were talking about this morning, and it's a common thing that I've observed, that you learn how to be successful by learning how to be successful as the only woman in the room. And then lo and behold comes a day that another one comes in, and you're like, oh my God, now I have competition. Like, and you don't really think about this person as competition because you figured out how to be the only, and now this creates a different dynamic. And I think it's something that it really behooves us all to think about and be thoughtful about how we can help. And Betsy, you had some ideas on that.
Yeah, well, when we first started working with our small group of 10 women in about 2003, as we began to grow a little bit, we started running into some dynamics around, like, well, this is mine, and ownership, and it's kind of uncomfortable. And we read this great book, and it's called She Wins, You Win. And I can't remember the author, I apologize. But the premise of the book is that when there's another woman in the room or another woman in your community, that you're thoughtful and deliberate about how you're actually helping them to be successful. So they go through all sorts of examples. So what is it that I'm doing today to help Amy be successful on the stage? What is she doing to help me? And then even taking it to like literal points where when you're going to go have work done on your house, are you looking for a female contractor? Or are you finding ways to make other women successful in traditionally non-technical or non-women run, you know what I'm trying to say, groups? So that was the point, and it really got our minds in the right place. So when another woman comes in, and you're starting from that place, it really changes your tone. I had a really interesting experience over the last 6 months. I began working, if you were here last year, remember Erin Chappell was the moderator, and she is now my boss. And we've been friends for many years. What I found is that her personality, when we're friends, is different than when we're working. It was a shock to me because I'm not, that's just not judgment, but I'm just not like, I'm just the same all the time. So it was a shock to me that she was sort of this rainbow person outside of work, and then inside work she was a scoped version of it. And I didn't know how to act, and so I had to kind of fall back into what am I helping to do to make her successful? What is she doing to help me be successful? And focus on that. So we all have our methods. But
I thought it was so funny that you mentioned when you talked about that, and I had been on the other side of it where I invited a friend after she was the right person for the job. We interviewed her, and she ended up on my team when I was in video games. And we had been great friends for a number of years, and then we get into one-on-ones, and it was like we were two different people, and we were having trouble, and it was it was stressful at times, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And we got through it, and we're still friends, which is great, and the game was great. But it wasn't until I got to Microsoft and saw this really old training video on the differences between communication styles in men and women. And I watched the video, and it's like, oh my God, I communicate like a guy. And Amy didn't understand why I was doing that. And it was a really big revelation for me. I realized how different my work self could be from my personal self. And it's natural. I mean, these instincts to kind of protect your turf at first, that's way lower in the sort of instinct category than we can necessarily control. The key is just recognizing it and then realizing we can help each other. Well, thank you, ladies. The next question I had was asking if you guys could share an example of when your network might have paid off for you in some particular milestone.
I have a great anecdote on that one. I've been kind of also fighting Facebook, not just Twitter, but I'm not somebody who likes to have my stuff out there on Facebook. And I should really just set up two separate profiles, a work and a home, but I don't. I have one. So I have a lot of tech people coming into my Facebook network and trying to keep my family from posting embarrassing photos on my Facebook page. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy. But I accept almost anybody who asks me on Facebook because I assume they may be a reader. And so I just accept a lot of random people. So I accepted this one person. I didn't know him at all. I had never heard of him. I just said, sure, you're a friend. Next thing I know, I get a tip on Facebook with some awesome secret documentation from this guy who I didn't know at all. And it was really interesting because I thought, you know, just by putting yourself out there and being willing to network and opening your network up, you suddenly have a much broader set of people who you may not even really know, but who know you somehow, and they're helping you. So not an excellent story from Microsoft, perhaps.
I'm just thinking to myself, we will not be friends on Microsoft. I mean, on Facebook.
But yeah, it really is one of those things. I was never a big believer in social media, but it really does give you a much wider network. So I say give it a shot and see what can happen.
That's a good one. Yeah, I found that the network pays off in little ways and in big ways. You know, it's in the little ways when it's like, I can't believe I have this deadline, I can't get it done. You can tap someone to help you that you might not have thought of, and it might not be their job, but you've built a network and you do the favor exchange back and forth, and that comes into play. But more than that, it's been that I've been able to use my network to help move other people. So somebody comes in and they're interested in thinking about moving over to a different division or thinking about moving to a different company, and then I can go to my network and say, here's somebody you should talk to, or here's somebody who's had a similar experience, or oh, you want to move overseas, here's somebody who's done that expat thing, and this is kind of information on what it's like. So the network has been super beneficial for me personally, but it's also been really great to see the ways that you can use it to help make the people around you better, and then help them build their networks, which then builds yours as well.
Yeah, I was trying to think of something that had happened in the last 5 years with regard to work that wasn't connected to my network.
Yeah.
Like really, even deliverables that I have, I use my network for. changing jobs, finding my new job. I mean, it just seems like it's every time I turn around. The thing that came to my mind over the last a few months, I've been just having a lot of thinking about what's my future, what am I going to do next, where am I going, and I don't know if anyone else is like this, but I have to talk about it a lot. So I like my network because then I can spread it out. Like I can go like 15 different people and have the same conversation if that's what I need to do, and not feel like I'm talking anybody's ear off and boring them with the same topic. They think I have something new to talk about. So I really do that. And it seems like by the time I kind of get to the end, my story has changed to the point, okay, I think I know how I'm going to handle this. I think I know what my next steps are. And then by the end of the conversation, the people that are kind of higher up rank-wise take a long time to get in to see. So by the time I get to them, I seem to kind of have my story together, and I walk out feeling pretty smart. So I think they just help me all the time. I use it constantly.
I've been lucky enough to also be on the board with Betsy on the Women's Leadership Council, and I've just been moved the last couple years watching how genuine the connection is between these women and how genuine the desire is to help. And I hope you feel that from these panelists too. I mean, there's a genuine desire to create connections and to help other women. And in some ways that helps yourself too, as you were talking about the network going both ways. But, you never know what kind of support network you're going to need, like Betsy was saying. It's all kind of intertwined for us. Like I go through intense medical problems, and the women in the Women's Leadership Council are there to kind of talk me through stuff and give me perspective. And you never know when you're going to need it, so build it while things are calm and happy and we have everybody in the room. I think the last guided question before we move to open Q&A, so if we have the mic runners, if we could start to get those guys set up.
Are those the guys in the red shirts?
Oh, they're already set up, great. Oh. So we will be using them shortly. How and where did you guys meet your own support circles, the folks that you consider your most important confidants? Apparently this is a tough
Everywhere. Everywhere. If I just kind of think about some of the people I know, even in this room, and where I've met them, Mir Rosenberg down here at the front table has been a long time friend and peer working at Microsoft. Think about Helene. Helene is somebody that I just run into all the time, and we interact on different levels, and she's somebody that I talk to, and I could totally sit down and have an hour-long conversation. Everywhere I go, I try to make an effort to kind of find those people that are meaningful to me and connect with them and kind of keep track of them. Bob Kelly gave me a really great piece of advice. We were talking about a potential sponsor for me, and I said, well, I used to work for Mosen, this man that works in the development division, and he pops up as a sponsor for me sort of naturally, but I've never really maintained our connection. And he goes, oh, you need to do that better. You need to get on it. Regular every 6 months and be a little bit systematic about maintaining them. So I've tried to do that so that it's natural, but it's also not. Sorry, I don't have lunch plans on my calendar with Amy, but I'm going to, right? So we'll be hooking up, or when is Mary Jo going to be in town? We'll make sure that we get together for lunch. And just you have to be deliberate about who you're going to connect with.
I think you meet them at work, you meet them at conferences. One of my, tightest networking buddies I met at a conference 20 years ago. We were both standing in the back because, one, it was very full and the seats didn't appear to be immediately available, and two, it was very boring, and we were both kind of on that, if we stay back here, we can kind of sneak out and nobody will notice thing. And we found ourselves a sisterhood in that attitude. And so later, when we were sitting at the bar, not at the session, we had a talk about that, and we have remained, fast friends and really part of the tight circle that stays together for all kinds of work, family, life advice. But keep your eyes open. I think just, when people are looking to date, they're always thinking about making that connection. But you kind of date your friends too, and it's a connection on a different level, but your network and the people that are helpful to you and that you enjoy being with and that can help you, that's also a relationship that you have to care and feed, just as you, I think, as Betsy was saying, wherever you meet them, you need to kind of indulge a little bit in feeding them and taking care of that network so that it continues to be there for you.
This is going to sound silly, but when I worked on The Sims for a long time, and that was kind of where I finally got a mental image that helped me with the networking thing, because they have this little social motive, and they also have like a sort of a friendship score with people, and over time it would start to decline until the point where those people just basically forgot you existed. And it was, I remember feeling, God, it's so hard to keep friendships with all these people. Oh, you need lots of personal, oh, there's life learnings in here, sneaky people. And so that weirdly, that image has always kind of been in my head, like
accidental.
Yeah, what is the score with this friend? In as much as like, when was the last time I talked to them? When was the last time I kind of re-upped things? And you can get, you know, and a lot of us are busy, and sometimes different people's communication styles work better. Like some people, Facebook makes them feel very connected to people, and you can get away with that. Some people, phone is really important to re-up that relationship.
Yeah, one thing that's been really an interesting development for me is how much of my social network are people I've never met. There are people I know on instant messaging, email, and Twitter, and they live all over the world. I mean, it's funny, when I get up in the morning, I live in New York, when I get up in the morning, I sign on to instant messaging, and the first person every morning who greets me is one of my buddies in Australia, and he's like, "Good morning, do you want to hear what's happened while you were asleep?" Then Pakistan comes on, India, and then the UK, start hearing from my friends over there, and it's really incredible because they keep you clued in, they're watching out for you, they're making sure you don't miss things, and I hope I get to meet them someday, but if I don't, they're really good buddies virtually too.
It's an awesome feeling to meet someone you've already known for a long time, the kind of discovery. Sure. I actually had one final sort of question just for you, Mary Jo. I know that you had mentioned that you wanted to talk a little about the declining female representation in the blogger corps, and from your unique perspective, where you're kind of you know, a lone wolf trying to establish a lasting presence in journalism. Do you have anything you wanted to say about like outreach or what
Sure.
you're seeing?
There's actually one other of the women blogger corps sitting here, Mary Branscombe. But there aren't, you know, when I started out in journalism 20 odd years ago, there were actually a surprising number of women tech journalists. There was like a really big core of us. And over the years, as journalism has kind of been condensing and almost dying out as a profession, and blogging has been really rising to prominence, I've been really surprised that there aren't more of us women Microsoft bloggers out there covering the issues. And you know, there are women bloggers, obviously. There's a lot of really very prolific and very good ones. But I really want to see more younger women come in and join the core of these up-and-coming bloggers who cover Microsoft. And I'm kind of at a loss how to get them to see what a great career this is and bring them into the network. And I have one who I was kind of working with and watching, and then she just dropped out. And everybody else I work with is kind of like the up-and-coming core are men. And I just am kind of reaching out here and saying, if you know, anyone have ideas or thoughts or people they can recommend, because I would love to mentor some up-and-coming young tech bloggers who want to learn about Microsoft. And I think this is like such an awesome profession, and it's another way to become a woman in technology if you aren't an engineer.
And hopefully Mary Jo's invitation gives some folks some courage, regardless of who you might want to work with as a mentor. A lot of women genuinely want to help you, and an email or a call really doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't cost anything, and the worst they can say is that they're busy. It can make such a difference. And the numbers of women going into computer science and technology are declining. I won't give you my speech that I give at schools and stuff, but it's a growing problem, and we watch a lot of women leave the industry because they don't have the right support level, or they hit a major life milestone like maternity, and they don't have people to help them get through it. So it's so important to kind of watch out for the other women you see around you so that they'll still be around you. With that, I think we're ready for open Q&A. So if any of you ladies out there have a question for anyone on the panel, please raise your hand, and one of these wonderful folks in the red shirts will bring you a microphone. Does anybody out there want to start? Yes, we have one over here. Oh, let's wait for a microphone, because we have very bad ears up here.
Right here in the red shirt.
Can we get someone to the lady in the red shirt here? And Apparently it's a little tight in there.
Yeah,
I'll have to come up.
there.
Hi. Would never actually lose my job if I had maternity, but I would lose my job. I wouldn't go back to being as technical as I would because someone would step in. So I would still have the same job title, but I wouldn't be administering exchange, setting up system center configuration manager. I'd probably end up at first line support. So how do you avoid that?
It's interesting that you asked that question. As we were talking about this just now, I was thinking about a woman that, she might be here. So there's a woman that I know that I have a lot of influence on her career, and she is pregnant. And we had the same discussion, what's going to happen to me when I come back? And I can tell you from my experience, it's about choices and scheduling. So you have a certain amount of time in the day and you have things you have to get done and you have to decide and prioritize where you're going to go. And I would describe it more as you might have been doing this and then maybe even slowly flatten out a little bit, but it shouldn't be for that long if you don't want it to be. And then it will pick back up. It depends on your organization and how your company works, but in general, you should be able to just expect a little bit of a slowdown and then ramp back up. I think I got promoted within 5 or 6 months after my coming back to work, and I took a long leave. And yeah, it was, at first I couldn't spend as much time, but I'm happy to talk with you more about the baby thing afterwards if you want to talk more. There's a lot of, I think, techniques that you could do. See, that would be a good blog post.
Yes, we were talking about a Women in Technology blog. And on the subject of following up, we have this room for a long time after the lunch, so if any of you have personal things you want to follow up or you want to meet some of us, we'll be milling about for a bit up here, and we'd love to continue talking with you. So thank you for your question. Other questions? I'll try to be more strategic about calling on people near microphones. All right, we had one here.
How do you handle situations where women see you as a threat?
So I have found there have been several places in my career, and some of it I only realize in retrospect, where things happened and I'm like, oh, it was the whole "you think I want your job" thing, or "oh, I was threatening to you" thing, right? And so sometimes my approach had been try to ignore it. Turns out that wasn't really so successful because you can only ignore in one direction, and if they're not ignoring you, it doesn't really help. So what I've done now is when I find myself in situations where I think that somebody may feel threatened, if there's another senior woman around and we're getting into that, ooh, there can only be one of us thing, is I just am direct and have gone into the look. We both need to be successful, and we can help each other be successful. Trying to fight each other in public is not really going to help either one of us, because by winning, you will also have won the queen of the territorial and doesn't like anybody around her battle, which is not a good long-term land holding. So I'd really recommend, if you feel that it's a situation where you can have a face-to-face conversation and say, look, I want us to both be successful. Now, sometimes they don't want to play, right? And when they don't want to play, you get into that, I don't really want to have to do the politics thing because this is really annoying. But if that happens, then you kind of have to look at who's your sponsorship base and try to play the, build your sponsorship outside of the room, so if it does come to this, you've got more people on your side by being more reasonable. And this goes back to your brand. If you become known as someone who's difficult, it's hard to have that kind of sponsorship. And that's not roll over and be a milquetoast, but is choose your battles, have your data, know what you really care about and what you stand for, and build that person who you are so that people are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt.
I really just like the approach, what's worked for me is just to stay in that place where I just keep reiterating, what can I do to help you be successful? And when you ask that question, it's disarming. I mean, what can I do to help you be successful says, I'm here to help you. Now, if they decide not to play, that could happen too. But if you're really consistently, for me, when I've really consistently come from a place of how am I engaging with you, how am I helping you be successful and stay there, and not, you know, yeah, you do have to build your support, and if you're trying to get something done, you might need more work, but just keep coming back to that. It's, for me, I found it really damaging when I flip the bit, right? Like, you go, I'm willing to help you be successful, and you get the no thank you vibe back, and then I'm like, well, screw you, I'm gonna make this happen anyway. It doesn't work so good. And what ends up happening is just such a small world. You know, we were talking about that this morning. It's just such a small world that coming back, and you're gonna have to deal with that person again. It's gonna come back around. So what is it that you can do to stay in that place? So when something changes, you don't know what's going on with that person. Something could change. I mean, they might have something terrible going on that has nothing to do with work, and they're just not capable of being there at that moment. But when they are capable, you'll still be there. So like, that's kind of what I try to, because I've screwed it up both ways, and the other one seems to work a little better.
Did you have anything?
No, I don't.
The only thing I can say in those really difficult situations when they don't want to play is I just try to, and it probably seems obvious, but I try to remind myself to look at what their perspective is and why they're doing the things they're doing, like reading between the lines, because a lot of times things that seem completely irrational start to make a lot of sense when you realize this person was in a really difficult team before they came here, and they were burned before, and so they're just naturally defensive, and how can I like acknowledge that truth and find a way to work with them that works in those really tough situations. Hopefully you don't have to get to that point where you're thinking so meta, but it can help you get through the difficult times. Other questions? Oh, let's see.
Okay, I have a question. First of all, I want to say I'm really happy to be here and happy to address all of you successful ladies. I work in a company where I don't have the same problem. I don't have a lot of ladies in the panel of discussions. I have a lot of men. And sometimes I'm the only one in the engineering team to make a recommendation or do a performance tuning session. My question to you ladies is, how do you make yourself believable? Because a lot of time what is discouraging to me is that they take my recommendation, but they hire somebody outside, or they go to somebody else, and at the end, when they provide the same recommendation I made, you know, I'm over here in the corner like, okay, that's what I said, but I want to make sure that I am addressing them. You know, sometimes I take the stand that I am probably too strong, because some of those men have told me, oh, but don't get too emotional, because, you know, I'm like, hey, why did you do this way? They think I'm emotional. So how do you balance that? How to be strong enough or not soft enough so they don't get offended? I don't know.
It's a great one.
Who would like to go first?
I would. I think one thing that I've always tried to remember, because I'm a lot of times in a difficult position of having to ask people difficult questions that they don't want to answer. And so I don't want to come off as, you know, like, all right, I'm going to make you answer me. I'm going to just browbeat you until you answer me. My attitude is be prepared. I always come prepared. And I always do my homework before I come in. And I feel like, okay, even if you're not going to help me and you're not going to answer me, I'm going to be prepared, and I'm going to be professional, and I'm going to show you that I really care about this and that I am the right person, because I am consistently here on time and prepared. And it sounds really basic, but over time you wear them down.
I think knowing your data. Now, there's always that bind where I'm emotional, but this guy over here is merely passionate in what he believes, right? But know your data. I think the more you just focus on being smart about your topic, to Mary Jo's point, you can win over time. You can wear people down and get over to the point of view, because people do pattern match. And after a certain time, they'll go, oh, she was right again. And so then you start to get that respect. But it is not necessarily the first thing out of the gate. But don't be afraid to stick up for what you believe in, but also be savvy enough to the motion in the room to know when you've already lost. Like, don't sell past the close, and don't martyr yourself on everything that doesn't go your way, because over time that doesn't help you either. So you kind of have to work your room a little bit and understand the decision-making process. And sometimes that means you get your way and you're right because you've gone to somebody outside of the room who has more power in the room, and they may know you're right and it was your idea. Everyone else at the table may not, but over time that does come out.
Those are great points. I love the idea of going outside the room. And just point of clarification, while I have these 300 women that I get to see occasionally, I am almost always the only woman in the room. And because I think I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but it's probably barely a double-digit percentage of women in engineering in our group. So 1 in 10, 2 in 10, 3 in, I don't know what the number is exactly. It's small. I have two thoughts that come to mind. One is I acknowledge that you probably do have the great idea, and that does happen. I think that's why we were clapping, because it's something that we can all just so relate to. A couple of tactics that I have seen be very effective. One is in technical discussions, at least in my group, I can't always come in prepared because I don't know what the discussion is going to be. So I don't always have the answer for something. So in those cases, when I think I might have an answer or an idea and I throw it out there and it gets pushed to the side, I'll often try to leave an opening to come back and have a discussion. Hey, I think this is an important topic for us to discuss. I'd like to have some time to think about it and get back to you. So leaving the decision open, finding ways to not close the decision. And then really following up. And I like following up in email when I'm dealing with something that's technical for a couple reasons. One is I don't use technical language when I'm talking. I say stuff, I say things, I say doohickey, it's just not my language. When I'm writing and I'm putting together a problem set, or a problem, something I want to solve, when I'm writing, it's often technical. So it might be that the way to get your point across is to write down your suggestion and send it in email and put your teammates in a position to answer you. And then you might, even before you send the mail, you might send it to a couple people privately and say, here's my idea, what do you think? Can you give me some feedback? I'd be interested to know if you think this is a good idea. And then when you come back in the room, now you've got the two people that reviewed your mail and feel like they're helping you, which Jennifer and I were talking about earlier, how important it is to give people the opportunity to help you be successful. As a woman, I feel like I've really had to be independent about being successful. And when you're in these kind of groups, where is the room for other people to come in and have your back? So writing stuff down, getting stuff outside the room, and then when you come back, and then the first idea is that I like to do is leave the discussion open. So is this a closed decision, and when is my opportunity to contribute? Because in the room sometimes it's really hard. I totally agree.
So I have two other general purpose tips for in the room discussions. And we joked at the beginning about, sitting like a man, but many of us were trained from birth to be courteous. And that means if you come into a meeting and the table is crowded, you'll sit down and you'll tidy yourself, right? To make sure that there's plenty of room for everyone else. Watch your male colleagues. No offense to any of them in the room, but they don't feel compelled to make sure there's room for others, right? So take up space. Put your stuff down, put your drink a little bit far away, take up more space, and it actually makes a difference in how you're perceived in the room. And don't automatically be polite and take a backbench seat if it's going to be crowded because you don't necessarily think you have anything to contribute. Sit at the table. Sit at the middle of the table if you can. Really think about how you're positioned within the room, because position matters, and it sends all kinds of nonverbal cues that relate into the culture of how you are received.
Especially like in a multicultural environment, like it becomes even more important. I love that you brought that point up because I'm so passionate about like perception. I do acting in my free time, and one of the things we get to do in the Women's Leadership Council is teach an improv class to women in engineering, like a basic improv class, and it's been really educational for me to learn like what women are taught in other cultures, not to make eye contact, not to take up space, and those things are handicaps whether those women know it or not. And we try to reach a tone in the classes where we're not asking them to change themselves all the time. We're just trying to teach them the rules of the game so that they can play fairly along with everyone else. You shouldn't have to change yourself to be successful, but you can learn tools. And for some people that's taking improv classes. For some people there may be classes out there, or just talking to women friends and getting this kind of advice. Perception's really powerful. But never let anyone tell you that you don't belong at the table, and never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong at the table. Other questions? Okay.
Hi. I just want to thank you for being here. This was great. But my question is, when you're looking for a mentor and you don't really have anybody in your company that fits that bill, what are your tips to try to, advocate for somebody to be a mentor?
Before I came to, so I'm not sure fits the bill, meaning if you're looking for a woman mentor or are you looking just any mentor? Okay. So before I came to Microsoft, I worked for in computer sales and also ran a little ISP. And they were just these tiny little companies. And my manager, who would have probably been a good candidate for a mentor, was a drunk. And he was drunk every morning, so he wasn't a good person to talk to.
Advice might not have been so useful.
Yeah, not useful advice. So I had to go and find people that were around that could help me, right? That were sober, that could help. I don't think I've ever told anybody that guy was drunk. I just told them. Okay, I have to delete the company name from my LinkedIn. What I did is I went and found people. So in my interactions in that job, people were coming in from the outside, obviously, and I would just connect with someone that felt useful. The other way is great suggestion that I had from the ladies back at home was looking for those professional groups locally. So there are women's technical professional groups. And if you live in a tiny little town, it might not have something right there, but there's a lot of chapters of, you can look at the NC WIT page, National Community of Women in Technology, look at the Grace Hoppers page. You can reach out there's the Women 2.0 site that's amazing, and it's just all women and in technology, promoting women in technology. And if you're looking for someone, even a virtual mentor or a phone call mentor could work. So those would be the places that I would like. There's a whole bunch of questions right behind you. Okay.
Right, we got one here.
This question is for Betsy and Amy. Betsy, you talked about getting a sponsor. I was wondering if there are any other things that you have to consider when you get a sponsor. Does it have to be someone you know professionally and personally, or, and my other question is, I work for a company where a lot of people in the upper management are men. Very few women, there are many successful women in the company, but they haven't made it to upper management. And I was wondering if you ladies have any tips for growing in your career, moving up the ladder.
So the first question was about sponsors, and do you have to have a personal relationship? I think the answer is no. In fact, I'm in the process right now of setting up a sponsoring relationship with someone that I think was recommended to me, would be a good sponsor for me. I don't know him at all. It's a him. He is way up in our organization, and somebody I don't know at all. I can promise you that if I don't develop a personal relationship with him at some level, that it won't be a very useful sponsorship, right? So that person has to get to know you. You're going to have to be vulnerable to that person in a way that is letting them know, here's what I think I'm good at, this is what I'm bad at, and that's a personal relationship. I mean, there's degrees.
Doesn't mean that you go bowling every night.
We don't go bowling. We're unlikely to go bowling, but we will probably have lunch we'll probably develop a personal relationship. And you know what I've found, like, I mean, Bob Kelly or Ian, those guys have been sponsors of mine for many years, and I love them. I mean, I just adore those guys. I feel very connected to them, and they're wonderful people. So I hope so. I hope you get to have a personal relationship with your sponsors.
Do you have any guidance about like what level, or what, like, should they be very much more experienced than you, or just like one sort of
Depends on
level?
what you want, right? When you look at sponsorship or mentorship, you kind of have to think about what kind of help you're looking for, and I think that is a lot about, you know, the second part of your question in terms of tips for getting ahead. If you are one of very few women in your company, odds are you stand out, right? That either means you are in the very worst case part of the furniture and you're not noticed, but if you actually speak and have an opinion and are smart, you're more memorable because there's not a whole lot of other people like you. That in and of itself can be helpful. And I think it goes back to doing your homework and really just working hard and making sure in a non-kind of aggravating way that your work is being noticed. You know, I don't like the people who send the self-aggrandizing mails all the time that are, woohoo, look at what I did, and then they, you know, enlist the 40 other people to go, wow, kudos, wow, you rock. You know, like that starts to get old, and I think, okay, maybe your ego and your talent ratio is a little bit out of whack. But then there is the people who legitimately share with the appropriate people, this has gone on, I'm really pleased with these results, this is what I've learned, right? It's not just me, but this is what I learned from this experience and this is what I would recommend to others. Those become the kinds of self-promotional mails that get forwarded because they're not just about you, but they're helpful to others. And it keeps going back to, what can I do to help you? Because everybody around you is concerned about their own career, and what can I do to get ahead? So when you provide insights and value to them that helps them, that's the kind of stuff that lands you on the short list when people start thinking about, who could we put into this kind of a role?
Other questions? Oh, we have one here.
I just wanted to know, in your opinion, how important is family support for a successful working woman?
Oh, that makes me Mary Jo, what do you think?
Yeah. I can tell you, one of my biggest advocates is my mom. She listens to my podcasts even though she doesn't understand anything. She looks at my blog comments and gets mad when people insult me. So, I mean, I think it's great. So, sorry.
My question was basically to, how do you deal with the male members of your family who may not be as supportive as your female members?
Oh,
I mostly ignore my father. He was a little upset when I started working at Microsoft. He was a little bit of a fanboy for some other stuff. And that was discouraging at first because he was a role model for me, and that was the first time I had kind of run up against almost discouragement from him. And in that particular instance, I did have to kind of close it off. Earlier in life, he was the one who was helping me learn all this stuff. And it's funny how things can change sometimes, and how that can take you back when someone who was supportive isn't, or the other way around.
I think. Boy, for me, I think it just makes all the difference in the world to have that support. I'm not sure what advice to give to get people supportive of you if they're not. I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. I'd be open if anybody else in the room has a good idea there. I think it's very hard. Working hard is hard, and if you don't have the support of the people around you and their love and encouragement and trust and all that, that's really hard. I am not sure how to answer that. I think I would look within, stack rank my priorities, understand what's important to me, go back to those people, let them know why it's important to me, why I enlist their support, why I need their help. And maybe they're just not aware of how impactful I mean, I think people that love me, if they're hurting me, means they probably don't get it. I mean, people don't hurt you on purpose. And so I guess that's my approach.
It's when the support network of peer women is so important to help sort of refill confidence and help you figure out how to get past it and to prove.
And I think culture, are you Indian? Okay. Culturally, I think there can be some issues as well, right? So if you're from a culture where you're expected to be in a certain role and you're not playing that role, you're fighting an uphill battle. And I love the idea of finding other women who are in the same cultural situation and that could give some tips on how to address that. It's not something that I've had to deal with. So you have a member over here that was. Don't give up. Don't give up. Awesome. Yay. That's nice. See?
So my question is for all three of you. What is the most valuable piece of advice you've ever been given?
I know this one because I shared this, and those of you in the room who know me have probably heard me tell this story before. So I was at Microsoft working really, really hard, lots and lots of hours, and my weekends were normally, Saturday morning, cup of coffee, hang around, go to the office, because I would have something due on Monday. And then I wouldn't just do the thing that was due on Monday, I would find random emails or this other thing, and the next thing I know, I've spent 8 hours at work. And then Sunday would be a repeat of that, and maybe if it was a really good weekend, I had a pedicure, but that was kind of like, rocking. And then I met my husband, and I was fortunate enough to marry into my kids, so I didn't have to go through that whole birthing thing, which is great. So we have 3 kids, and I went from 0 to 150 miles into Little League and recital and like crazy. And so, there was this weekend, and he's going through the game schedule, because at the time all 3 of them were in Little League, and then there was some additional soccer stuff, and it was just this crazy weekend. And I said, well, I've got a presentation that's due on Monday. I've got to work. And he looked at me and he said, okay, what do you want to miss? I said, it had never occurred to me that I was living my life missing all kinds of stuff. And I said, well, I don't want to miss anything. And he said, it's your choice, what's the balance? How do you want to work this? And you might find that you can, in fact, be successful without working 16 hours every weekend. So we negotiated. He agreed that he would take dinner on Sunday night and give me 2 hours, a 2-hour block. And so I had 2 hours, and all I did was the presentation, which was really the only thing I had to get done for Monday. And lo and behold, work didn't suffer, boss wasn't mad, people weren't irritated, life goes on, and all that little ancillary stuff that I felt was so important turns out wasn't so important. And it was really this pivotal moment for me to realize that I can set the boundaries in what we like to talk about as the work-life balance. Like, I can be in charge, and not always. There are some times that the president of the company or the CEO trumps, the dinner I might like to go. I acknowledge that, and there's times that are exceptions. But in general, I set the rules. And you look at CEOs and major executives who've got crazy schedules, but they somehow still manage to be at the club at 6 o'clock every morning. So they're figuring out some way to manage their boundaries too. So the single best piece of advice I ever got was set your boundaries, respect yourself, and respect your interest in what's really important to you, and then let work be where it needs to be on that scale.
That's a good one. That is a good one. Very nice. Want to go?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, the really valuable advice I got was really love what you do. And it really comes home to me when I do interviews with people, because, as I said before, sometimes I interview people who don't want to be interviewed. And it's hard to win them over. Sometimes they've heard about you in advance and they don't really want to talk to you. Like your reputation precedes you. They hide in the men's room so they won't have to talk to you. That actually happened once.
Just once?
Just once, that I know of. But I feel like because I really, really, really love what I do, it comes through and it convinces people to talk to me. Yeah. And like, I really am interested in configuration manager. Like, I really care. And I think people, when I'm talking to them, feel that. Like, I'm not just sitting in the interview like, yeah. Like, they say something, I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. So is that like this? And when people see you're engaged and interested, their guard comes down a little bit. And it really, I feel like your passion will really come through and really help propel you in your career.
Yeah, I think last year when Mary Jo was interviewing me, we had a great conversation about our moms. And it's interesting that, the moms come up in these kind of things. But I lost my mom last summer to ovarian cancer. And really, the very first point I have up there is straight out of her mouth, which is you make your own happiness. That's the best advice I ever got. And in any situation that you're in, because I can think of situations I've been in when I haven't loved what I'm doing, but I still make my own happiness. That's still up to me. It's up to me to figure out what I need in my life and what makes me happy and what adds to my happiness. And I just love, I'm thinking about this young lady that's asking about the baby question and having this. And when I came back from leave, I shut my schedule down. I mean, I couldn't do it. I just could not do the pace I was doing before. And so I decided to make changes to my schedule. And I didn't ask permission. I just did it. I blocked out the morning. I didn't come in until 10 o'clock in the morning. I had to be home to breastfeed at 4:30. So there was one pump in the middle. I mean, I was on a schedule there. And so I was working at night. And there was other things I had to do to make up for that time. But I had to make myself happy. What are the things that I needed? And take responsibility for that, not waiting for someone else to come and tell me how to be happy or make me happy or whatever. I mean, find what you dig. And I don't know if I'm being that unique here. Like, it's really kind of the same thing as just make your own happiness. Yeah.
Thank you for a great question. We're almost out of time. It looks like we have a couple questions queued up. Let's cut it off with the folks who do have microphones in their hands, and then we will be here afterwards to talk with folks. If you do have other questions, we love continuing these conversations. So let's see, right over here.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I find that through seeking other women at work, I'm finding myself getting drawn into cycles of gossip and negativity and cattiness. And I want to try to separate myself from that, but still maintain contact with females and not appear aloof. How do I do that?
Such a great question. I'll tell you what my answer usually is. So as soon as the conversation starts, so-and-so, you not believe what's going on. So-and-so, blah, 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 blah. You know what? I'm really busy right now. I don't really want to talk about these kind of topics. Like, I'm just straightforward. Like, gosh, I don't really know her that well. Maybe something else is going on in her life that I'm not aware of, and I walk away. I mean, it's just walk away. And you can still be kind to them and be respectful of their desire to talk to her, but I'm not sure about her. I don't really know her that well. I'm not sure what's going on in her personal life, and maybe there's something hard going on, and that usually shuts it right down because people kind of feel dumb then. And they're
I encourage you to have a repertoire of female-appropriate topics to change the subject to at any given time.
That's a good one.
Breastfeeding would be one potential. I encourage you to think about shoes. You can always talk about shoes.
But that's awesome.
Yeah.
It works.
It does work. Yeah.
And in long term, if you run out of things to talk about shoes, if you find out something about that woman in particular that she likes to talk about more often than not, you can engage her in that conversation long term and build a network too. It's all connected. Okay, other folks yes.
So I work in Microsoft. It's a very diversified environment. And honestly, my question was more of the other way around. I got feedback from my coworkers saying that, oh, she really can get things done. She has that bullishness. So in what time, actually, in your career, you turn around and say that, oh, I'm actually female, so there are other ways I can approach things. I can build better reports with my peers. Is there any advice there? Because I think I'm, like Amy, you mentioned earlier, you said that, oh, we are just really trained to be more like men, but how can we be different so we can be more successful?
Oh, what a great question.
I think the number one thing that you cannot underestimate is the power of a smile. You can give negative feedback with a soft smile, and people will be much more receptive to it. You can use a softer touch. You can do a whole lot of things that are mitigated by the smile, and people are happy. Like there's a natural, you see a baby smile? Like, how can you not smile? There's something about seeing a smile that makes people have a little bit, and as long as it's genuine, I think that's one of the most powerful assets that you can take into a room.
Even when you're not speaking. Like, people are watching you when you're not speaking, and it can go a long way to making you seem open.
I have one more comment there. It reminded me of this lady over here that was asking about when she was in a meeting and trying to get things done, and kind of comes back to that, is that there does seem to be sort of an expectation that the scope of acceptable behaviors for women in the workplace, especially when you're working with a lot of men, seems smaller, right? Like, so how do you kind of stay in this narrow thing? And while she was talking, my response was, gosh, I just don't. I am who I am. I am emotional, and and I'm genuine about that emotion, and I think it provides an opportunity to connect with people in a way that maybe not all men can. Just your personality is who you are, and so relaxing into that. It also reminded me of conversations that we've had with a lot of women that come into technology. They've always been sort of the only woman in their class, if they're computer science or if they're in engineering, and they've really done a lot of work to make sure they don't stand out as a woman. So not wearing heels or dresses or skirts, or just kind of look like one of the guys. And I remember the point at which I started not looking like one of the guys, and I had worked with these guys for a long time, and all of a sudden I was like, I'm wearing something cute. I'm sick of wearing sweatshirts and t-shirts, and I'm just going to dress how I want to dress, and I just put it aside, and it created a wonderful connection as a person with them. Like, they saw me as a person. So I think you should just go for it, whatever feels comfortable for you.
I took a training that was about how to give negative feedback, how to be more assertive without coming across as aggro or psycho or something. And part of the training was yes, about being genuine, and I do love shoes, and I wear all kinds of crazy things to work all the time. But the smile thing came up a couple of times, and so the sentence that I came to the team with at the end of the day, like, what did you learn? I said, well, a soft smile, can defang negative sentiment. And somebody wasn't listening, and they're like, what? They taught you soft smile, deep fangs? And so that's my mnemonic to remember: soft smile, deep fangs.
And with that note, we are at the end of our time today, and I would like to thank all of the ladies, and thank you guys for being here. Thank you to Mira Rosenberg for all her help in organizing the panel. I know that there were some folks who had questions for us. Please do come up and talk to us. We're happy to answer those questions individually or online. Quick plug, if you're interested in volunteering, like Mary Jo was talking about giving back, I am working with a nonprofit that works with girls in schools to encourage them to consider technology careers. And there are tons of nonprofits like that, but I'm happy to talk to you about ours. And just remember, do you ladies have any last words you want to give out to the...
Yeah, make sure you reach out to us on Twitter. My alias is Betsy@Microsoft.com. You're welcome to send me mail. We're hoping to be developing a LinkedIn site for the Women's Leadership Council and STB that's public, and so we'd love to have you join us there. It's not there yet, but if you get on the Twitter thing, Betsy Spear, you can keep track of when it comes up.
Amy Boris-Dukas on Twitter. Mary Jo's on Twitter. We're all on Twitter.
We'll leave the slide up in case you want to take notes. And thank you so much. I know it's been an honor for us to talk to you. And best of luck in all that you do.
Yay,
Thanks for coming.